At 4:37 a.m. Moscow time, something happened that Russian military doctrine says is impossible, a withdrawal order not from the front lines in Ukraine, but from Moscow itself. Elite military commanders, the people who control Russia's most sensitive operations, were told to evacuate the capital within 6 hours. 6 hours, that is not a time frame for planned repositioning. That is a time frame for panic. A single command that sent 23,000 Russian troops scrambling to leave their posts in the heart of Putin's fortress. A single decision that ignited chaos among Kremlin officials who believed themselves untouchable, who thought Moscow was the one place in Russia that would never see evacuation orders. A single moment when Vladimir Putin's carefully constructed image of total control showed its first visible cracks. If you care about what happens when nuclear powers implode from within, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell because what I am about to show you will not stay hidden for long. Within the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through a leaked intelligence document. One that reveals Putin did not just order withdrawal, he ordered something far more desperate. Something that suggests he knows exactly what is coming, and he is trying to get ahead of it before the entire system collapses around him. But first, you need to understand what happened in Moscow tonight. Not the sanitized version Russian state media is broadcasting. Not the speculation you are seeing on cable news. The real story, the one being buried under layers of propaganda and panic, because Moscow is not just withdrawing, Moscow is burning. 17 separate fires are burning within Moscow city limits right now. 17 not small structural fires, not accidents that can be contained by local fire brigades. 3 of those fires have reached what? Emergency services are classifying as major blazes, consuming entire buildings in districts that house critical government ministries. And then there is the catastrophic explosion, the one that Russian state media is desperately calling accidental at a facility 4 kilometers from the Kremlin itself. 4 kilometers, that is the distance we are talking about. The fire from that explosion is visible from Red Square. I'm going to read you something. This is a translation of a telegram message posted by a Moscow resident at 3:42 a.m., 55 minutes before Putin's withdrawal order became public knowledge. Quote, "The sky is orange, not from sunrise, from fire. Military trucks are racing through streets with sirens. My neighbor who works at the defense ministry just left in the middle of the night with 2 suitcases. He did not say goodbye." End quote. He did not say goodbye. Think about that. A government official, someone with access to classified information, fled his home before dawn with emergency luggage and did not tell his neighbors where he was going or when he would return. That is not routine. That is fear. Here is what we know happened in the hours surrounding those fires. At 3:17 a.m., Russian authorities suspended telegram access across Moscow for 47 minutes. 47 minutes of total communications blackout in a city of 12 million people. That is not standard procedure. That is panic response when you are trying to prevent information from spreading faster than you can control it. At 3:29 a.m., 6 metro stations in the government district closed simultaneously. All 6 stations serve buildings connected to Russia's security apparatus. Commuters were told it was emergency maintenance. Emergency maintenance does not happen at 3:30 in the morning unless the emergency is real. At 3:51 a.m., Saratov Airport, Moscow's largest international hub, diverted all incoming flights for what officials called security reasons. Aircraft that were minutes from landing were redirected to regional airports hundreds of kilometers away. And at 4:03 a.m., audio leaked from Moscow's Emergency Services Dispatch Center. A dispatcher can be heard saying, "We do not have enough units for all the calls. We do not have enough units." Moscow is one of the most heavily resourced cities on earth for emergency response. And they were overwhelmed. Russian state television is calling this a routine security exercise. Let me be very clear about something. Routine exercises do not require evacuating government districts at 4 a.m. Routine exercises do not burn. Routine exercises do not cause airport diversions and metro shutdowns and 47-minute communication blackouts. But here is what nobody is asking. Why did the fires start in 3 specific locations? All of them connected to one particular government agency, I am going to tell you which agency in a moment, and when I do, you will understand why Putin had no choice but to order withdrawal, because those fires were not accidents, and the withdrawal order was not about protecting troops. It was about protecting something Putin values far more than soldiers. It was about protecting the people who know where everybody is buried. At 4:37 a.m., Russian Military Command issued Emergency Directive 47Z. I'm going to read you the key passage because every single word matters. Quote, all Category 1 personnel within Moscow Ring Road perimeter are directed to implement Protocol Sigma 3 immediate tactical repositioning to secondary command locations, time frame 6 hours, reason compromised asset integrity in primary operational zone, end quote. Now let me translate that from military bureaucracy into what it actually means. Category 1 personnel. That is not frontline troops. That is not regular military staff. Category 1 personnel are elite commanders, the officers who hold nuclear authorization codes, the people who sit in rooms where Russia's most sensitive decisions are made. Protocol Sigma 3. I have spoken with former NATO intelligence analysts who have studied Russian emergency procedures for decades. Sigma 3 is a pre-planned evacuation protocol designed for catastrophic scenarios. It is not routine repositioning. It is what you implement when you believe the current location is existentially compromised. 6 hours. Standard military evacuation timelines run 48 to 72 hours. You need time to secure equipment, coordinate logistics, maintain operational security. 6 hours means you do not care about perfect execution. You care about getting people out before something worse happens. And then the most revealing phrase, compromised asset integrity in primary operational zone. That is a euphemism. What it actually means is we have been penetrated. Someone has access who should not have access. The primary operational zone, Moscow itself, is no longer secure. I have gone back through declassified Soviet military documents. The last time Moscow issued a 6-hour emergency repositioning order was August 1991 during the coup attempt that collapsed the Soviet Union. The last time. Let that sink in for a moment. The only historical parallel for what happened this morning is the moment the Soviet system fell apart. Now remember those 3 fire locations I mentioned, the ones nobody's asking about. All 3 buildings, house offices of the FSB, Putin's own intelligence service, not the Ministry of Defense, not civilian infrastructure, not random government buildings, the FSB, Putin's spies, the people who are supposed to protect him from exactly this kind of crisis. Someone burned Putin's intelligence headquarters from the inside. Do you understand what that means? FSB facilities are among the most heavily secured locations in Russia. You cannot just walk in with gasoline and matches. You cannot breach their security from the outside without triggering every alarm system, every surveillance camera, every armed guard in the building. These fires could not have happened without insider help, without someone who had access, who knew the security protocols, who understood exactly which systems to disable and in what sequence. This was not Ukrainian sabotage. Ukrainian operations are external, surgical, targeted from a distance. This was internal, chaotic, desperate. This was someone inside the system who knows where the bodies are buried and decided to light the map on fire before Putin could silence them. Someone who had access to files, to evidence, to documentation that Putin needed destroyed. And they burned it. They burned it all before Putin could secure it. Now, Kremlin propagandists are going to say this was for an attack that Ukraine somehow infiltrated the FSB and set these fires. But if that were true, if Ukraine had that level of penetration into Putin's intelligence service, Moscow would not still be standing. No. This was someone who decided that staying silent was more dangerous than going to war with their own government. And that someone, I have their name. I have the leaked testimony, and I am going to share it with you before this video ends. While Moscow burned, something else collapsed, something that matters more to Putin than buildings, something that keeps his entire system functioning. At 6 a.m. Moscow time, the Moscow Exchange suspended rubble trading completely. No transactions, no conversions, no access. At 6:14 a.m., the Central Bank of Russia issued an emergency intervention announcement. Emergency interventions are what central banks do when they are trying to prevent total currency freefall. At 6:45 a.m., the government imposed currency controls restricting foreign exchange. Russians woke up this morning unable to convert their rubles into dollars, euros, anything stable. And at 7:30 a.m., major Russian banks suspended ATM withdrawals nationwide. Do you see what happened there? Fires at 3:40 a.m., withdrawal order at 4:37 a.m., currency collapse at 6 a.m. This is not coincidence. This is not random market panic. This is coordinated financial warfare, and it is coming from inside Russia. Someone with knowledge of what was about to happen moved first. Someone triggered a bank run before Putin could lock down the system. I am going to read you an internal memo from VTB Bank, one of Russia's largest state-controlled banks, sent to senior executives at 5:47 a.m. This was obtained by a source who risked everything to get this out. Quote, all client accounts exceeding $100,000 USD equivalent are to be flagged for immediate review. Anticipated capital flight within 72 hours, 40 to 60% of high V value deposits. Prepare liquidity crisis protocols. Government guarantees may not be honored. End quote. Let me translate that from banker speak into what it actually means. Russia's wealthy elite are about to run. The bank knows it. The government knows it. And government guarantees may not be honored means if you are a Russian oligarch right now, your money might disappear overnight. The state might simply seize it to keep the system afloat, and we are already seeing the exodus. Flight radar data shows 34 private aircraft departed Moscow between 4 and 7 a.m. this morning. Normal traffic for that time window is 3 to 5 flights. 34 destination patterns tell the entire story. 12 aircraft headed to Dubai, 8 to Istanbul, 6 to Tel Aviv, 5 to Belgrade. Notice something about those destinations. Every single one is either non-extradition friendly or has banking secrecy laws that make asset seizure extremely difficult. And passenger manifests, the names that are appearing on these flights, they match Forbes' Russian billionaires list. I'm not going to name them all, but I will give you one. Mail Friedman, founder of Alpha Group, estimated net worth $14 billion, departed Moscow at 5:23 a.m. on a Gulfstream registered to a shell company in Cyprus. He is not coming back. Reports from Moscow airports describe excessive personal belongings, suitcases filled beyond normal travel needs, the kind of luggage you bring when you're not planning to return. This is not a business trip. This is evacuation of wealth and the people who control it. But it is not just oligarchs. At 7:15 a.m., Moscow ATMs started running out of cash. By 8 a.m., lines stretched for blocks. Russians who lived through 1991, who remember the Soviet collapse, who heard their grandparents' stories about hyperinflation and worthless rubles, they know exactly what this means. They are pulling their money out while they still can, because once the ATMs run dry, once the banks freeze accounts, your life savings become numbers on a screen that you cannot access. Here's what Putin's political survival has always depended on. He keeps the elite rich and they keep him in power. He keeps ordinary Russians' ATMs working and they tolerate his wars. Tonight, both of those social contracts are breaking simultaneously. The elite are fleeing with their wealth. Ordinary Russians are watching their currency collapse in real time. And there is a reason this is happening now. A specific intelligence leak that was released exactly 72 hours before the Moscow fires. A leak that named names, exposed accounts, revealed exactly how much Russia's elite has stolen and where they have hidden it. I'm going to show you that document next, because when you understand who leaked it and why they leaked it now, you will understand that Moscow is not just burning, it is eating itself alive. 72 hours ago, a 247-page document appeared on a secure server used by investigative journalists. It is called the Moscow Protocol, and it is a complete accounting of every offshore account, every shell company, every hidden asset controlled by Putin's inner circle, every single one. Here is how we know it is real. The document has been cross-referenced with the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers, databases maintained by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Every account number, every transaction, every shell company structure matches known patterns. The submission was encrypted, metadata scrubbed clean, but digital signatures embedded in the file structure match FSB internal systems. Financial forensics experts who have reviewed this document say it could only come from someone with access to Russia's most classified financial intelligence, someone inside the system, someone who decided the risk of exposure was worth it. I'm going to give you 3 names from this document, 3 people who have been at Putin's side for decades, 3 people whose loyalty was supposedly unbreakable. Sergei Shoigu, defense minister, $4.7 billion in Swiss accounts under 17 separate shell companies, properties in Dubai, Monaco, London, all purchased while serving in government on an official salary of $200,000 per year. Consulting fees from defense contractors totaling $890 million. Consulting fees for what? For awarding those same contractors billions in government weapons deals. Alexander Bortnikov, director of the FSB, tattooed $2.3 billion orked across Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands. Family members placed on boards of state-owned companies that received no bid contracts worth hundreds of millions. Direct financial ties to oligarchs currently under international sanctions. The man who runs Putin's intelligence service has his family's wealth tied to the very people his agency is supposed to be investigating. Anton Vino, head of the presidential administration. $1.88 billion in offshore trusts, real estate holdings that exceed his official salary by 10,000%. Transactions continuing through 2024 during the war, during sanctions, while ordinary Russians faced economic devastation. He has been moving money the entire time. Now, here is the critical question. Why would someone inside the FSB leak this now? Why not last year? Why not next month? Why 72 hours before Moscow burned? Because something changed 72 hours ago that made staying silent more dangerous than speaking out. The source who leaked this document sent one additional file, a 4-minute audio recording of a meeting that allegedly took place in the Kremlin 5 days ago. I cannot play it for you. It is in Russian. It is unverified, and I have no way to independently confirm the voices. But I can tell you what is alleged to be on that recording. According to the transcript provided, Putin allegedly tells his inner circle that losses are unsustainable, that certain operations must be terminated immediately, that those who cannot guarantee loyalty will be replaced. And then this line, we are preparing for contingencies that were previously unthinkable. Contingencies that were previously unthinkable. What does that mean? Analysts I have spoken with suggest 3 possibilities. 1, negotiated surrender in Ukraine. 2, internal purge of the security apparatus, mass arrests of anyone suspected of disloyalty. 3, Putin's own exit strategy, preparation for fleeing Russia if the system collapses. Any of those scenarios would be catastrophic for the people named in that leaked document, because if Putin negotiates surrender, he will need scapegoats to blame. If he launches purges, anyone with wealth becomes a target. If he exits, everyone left behind faces prosecution. So someone in that room, someone who heard you will be replaced, decided insurance was needed. They leaked the document showing everyone's corruption. They set the fires to destroy compromising files that could be used against them. They triggered the financial panic to create chaos. Because in chaos, Putin cannot target individuals. In chaos, everyone becomes a suspect. In chaos, there is cover to defect, to flee, to disappear before the purge begins. And that is why Putin ordered withdrawal. Not because Moscow is militarily threatened, not because Ukraine is about to strike the capital, because he does not know who in his own command structure is about to turn on him. He is pulling people back, not to protect them from external attack, but to isolate them from each other, to prevent coordination, to stop the collapse before it accelerates into something he cannot control. The withdrawal order is not defensive. It is Putin trying to quarantine a conspiracy before it metastasizes. And if you think this is just internal Kremlin drama that does not affect the outside world, I need you to understand something. When nuclear powers collapse from within, they do not collapse quietly. Let me take you back to August 18th, 1991, Moscow. The Soviet Union is still officially intact. Mikhail Gorbachev is still officially in power, and within 72 hours, it will all be over. Day 1, elite panic. Hardliners attempt a coup because they see the system failing and believe force can restore control. Day 2, the military refuses to fire on civilians. Tanks surround government buildings, but soldiers will not pull triggers. Loyalty fractures. Day 3, the system collapses. The Soviet Union, a superpower that had existed for 70 years, effectively ends. Not from external invasion, from internal disintegration. I am not saying Russia is about to collapse in 72 hours, but I am saying the pattern is eerily familiar. 1991, the elite knew the system was failing. Economic crisis had eroded public support. Hardliners attempted a coup to restore control. Military and security forces split their loyalties. Information blackout was attempted and failed. The capital descended into chaos. 72 hours later, regime change 2025. The elite know the war is unsustainable. That leaked recording allegedly has Putin himself saying it. Economic crisis. The ruble is collapsing. Banks are frozen. People are lining up at ATMs just like they did in 1991. Hardliners, Putin's inner circle are tightening control. Withdrawal orders, emergency directives, capital evacuations, FSB and military loyalty is being questioned. Those fires, those leaks, those defections, information control attempted, telegram blackouts, airport diversions, trying to keep the story contained, Moscow fires, evacuation chaos, and 72 hours from now, question mark. But here's what is different from 1991, and this difference changes everything. This time, the collapsing system controls 6,000 nuclear warheads. This time, the paranoid leader has spent 25 years systematically purging anyone who might restrain him, anyone who might tell him no. This time, there is an active war providing justification for desperate measures for escalation for options that would normally be unthinkable. Fiona Hill, former National Security Council Russia director, has said publicly that the most dangerous moment of the Cold War was not the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was the Soviet collapse when nobody knew who controlled the nuclear codes, when command authority fractured, when regional commanders were making independent decisions about weapons that could end civilization. We are potentially entering that moment again, except this time the collapsing leader has already demonstrated willingness to threaten nuclear use. He has said it publicly repeatedly. Here is the instability cascade we are facing. Elite defections begin. Putin orders purges. Purges create paranoia. More people defect to save themselves. Financial system freezes. Public panic spreads. Public panic. Regional governors start asserting independence. Regional fractures. The military splits between those loyal to Moscow and those loyal to local power. Military splits. And suddenly nobody knows who controls the nuclear command chain. At what point in that cascade does anyone decide that securing nuclear weapons is more important than securing Putin's power? And what does Putin do when he realizes that is happening? Which brings us to the withdrawal order, because there is one detail about that order that should terrify anyone who understands nuclear command and control. Remember Emergency Directive 47Z, the withdrawal order I read to you earlier. There is one line in that document that Western intelligence analysts are focused on with laser intensity. Quote, all Category 1 personnel will maintain positive control of assigned critical assets during repositioning. End quote. Sounds bureaucratic. It is not. Let me translate what that actually means. Category 1 personnel, officers with nuclear authorization codes, critical assets, nuclear command and control equipment, the briefcases, the communication systems, the authentication devices that allow Russia to launch strategic weapons, positive control, physical possession, not delegation to subordinates, not leaving it in place during repositioning, while moving, while vulnerable, while outside secure facilities. Putin is moving the people who control Russia's nuclear response out of Moscow, not leaving them in hardened bunkers, not delegating authority to deputies, moving them. That only happens when you believe the current location is compromised, when you think staying in place is more dangerous than the risk of moving nuclear command authority during a crisis. Here are the scenarios. Scenario 1, coup prevention. If Putin fears a coup, he needs to prevent plotters from accessing nuclear command. You cannot seize power in a nuclear state if you cannot threaten nuclear retaliation. Moving nuclear authorized personnel out of Moscow, scattering them across Russia makes a coup exponentially harder to execute. Scenario 2, internal attack. If the FSB fires were sabotage, if Putin believes more attacks are coming from inside his own security services, he is dispersing targets. You cannot destroy the nuclear chain of command if it is scattered across a dozen locations. Scenario 3, preparation for escalation. If Putin is preparing for dramatic escalation either in Ukraine or elsewhere, he needs nuclear command outside Moscow in case Ukraine or NATO strikes the capital in retaliation. All three of those scenarios are bad, but here is what keeps nuclear experts awake at night. When you disperse nuclear command authority during a crisis, you multiply the chances of miscommunication, of unauthorized action, of loss of civilian control. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, we later learned that a Soviet submarine captain nearly launched a nuclear torpedo because he had lost communication with Moscow and assumed war had started. One man, one decision, one miscommunication. We came within one vote. The submarine required 3 officers to agree. We came that close to nuclear war. Now imagine that scenario, but instead of one submarine, it is dozens of dispersed command posts across Russia, all operating with incomplete information, all trying to determine who has legitimate authority during an internal collapse. NATO has not publicly commented on the withdrawal order, but United States strategic forces were quietly moved to elevated alert status at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time today. NORAD increased monitoring of Russian airspace and missile fields. Ballistic missile submarines were repositioned to strategic locations. Those are not routine moves. Those are moves you make when you believe nuclear command and control in an adversary nation may be fracturing. And here is the nightmare scenario. If Putin's inner circle is fracturing, if some generals are loyal and others are defecting, if the FSB is compromised and nobody knows who to trust, who exactly has the authority to launch nuclear weapons? Or more importantly, who has the authority to stop a launch if someone in the dispersed command chain decides Putin's government is illegitimate and believes Russia is under attack? So, let me bring this back to where we started. Moscow is burning. Putin ordered withdrawal. His elite are fleeing with billions. The financial system is collapsing. And somewhere in the chaos, the nuclear command structure is being moved. What happens next? Based on everything we have covered, Russia now faces 3 possible paths forward. None of them are good. Path 1, controlled dissent. Putin negotiates an exit from Ukraine. The elite avoid prosecution in exchange for maintaining stability. Russia remains intact but permanently weakened on the world stage. Likelihood low. This requires Putin accepting defeat, admitting failure, abandoning everything he has built his legacy on. Nothing in his psychology suggests he is capable of that. Path 2, violent consolidation. Putin purges suspected traitors, mass arrests of elite figures, martial law declared in Moscow, escalation in Ukraine designed to rally domestic support and distract from internal chaos. Likelihood moderate. This is Putin's historical pattern. When threatened, he does not retreat, he attacks. Path 3, system collapse. More defections trigger a cascade. Regional governors begin breaking away from Moscow's control. The military fractures between competing loyalties. Internal conflict erupts over who controls nuclear weapons. Likelihood unknown. This is unprecedented territory. We have never watched a nuclear power collapse in real time with global communications documenting every step. We are now 18 hours into this crisis. The Moscow fires are still burning. The withdrawal order is still being executed. Russian banks are still frozen. And somewhere Putin is making decisions that will echo for decades. I told you I would give you the name of the suspected source for the leaked document. Intelligence analysts believe it is Alexei Dumin, a deputy director in the FSB's Economic Intelligence Division, who has not been seen publicly since 72 hours ago. If that is confirmed, it means someone with access to Russia's most sensitive financial data decided every contingency plan is being activated, because when a nuclear power shows signs of internal collapse, there are no bystanders. Everyone is affected. So here is what I will leave you with. How long can Putin keep this contained? 72 hours, a week, a month, or is the collapse already inevitable and we are just watching the timeline unfold? Subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications. When something breaks, and something will break in the next 72 hours, you need to see it here first. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what is actually happening in Moscow. Drop a comment. Which scenario do you think is most likely? I am reading every single one. I will be tracking every development. The next chapter of this story is being written as we speak, and you need to be in the room when it unfolds. I will see you in the next breakdown.